Hello everyone. Today is the webinar we are doing it. We welcome all our guest speakers and our chairperson and vice chairman of Sustainability Reporting Standard Boards. We have with us our eminent speakers and event enablers. We would like to introduce first our chairperson of the Sustainability Reporting Standard Boards, CA Siripriya Kumar. She is heading this Sustainability Reporting Standards Board, and we would like to welcome ma'am for her opening remarks. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah. So, on behalf of the Sustainability Reporting Standards Board of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, I take great pleasure in extending a very warm welcome to all of you to this first webinar that we're hosting from the board. And we sort of wanted to pick a theme that was most relevant in the context of the nation, and it had to be the social stock exchange. So, this is essentially a beginner's series on the social stock exchange because I think the whole idea is a bit new. There's Unnati, which got listed first, and a slew of enterprises that got listed yesterday. But this whole concept just needs to pick on a lot more. ICI, in addition to wanting to provide assurance support, the financial, the accounting framework, the questions that come from the donors as well as the bond holders and the NGOs and the issues that surrounding it. I think we see a much larger context in this concept of a social stock exchange. One of our core roles will also be to popularize this idea amongst NGOs, which we hope to do through the chartered accountants who work with these NGOs. Most of them get covered under the audit framework, or we consult for them, and the NGOs themselves. So it's in this context that we have this webinar. And I'd like to place on record my deepest appreciation to the speakers of the day, who are Shri Hemant Gupta, who's the MD and CEO of Equip Desi Investments Private Limited, Mr. Ramesh Swami, the director of SGBS Unnati Foundation, very historic because that was the first enterprise, first NGO to get listed on the social stock exchange. We also have Ms. Reema Agarwala, who's the vice president of Unitas Capital, who enable such registrations and listings to happen, and CA Manjari Sabnis. So here's a very, very hearty welcome to all of you. And we want this program to reach as many people. So we have this concept of event enablers, people who actually carry the message of this event forward. And we try and collaborate with our branches. We have about 174 of them. So we try and engage them. And this time, the event enablers are from the Ghaziabad branch, which is Dr. Navendu Garg, CA Manish Agarwal, CA Dr. Abhay Khansal, and CA Nithin Gupta. So, and what's the primary objective of this program? Very simple. We'd like to understand what NGOs are all about. Of course, we know the Dharpan, which is the portal where everybody is required to compulsorily, register themselves. It's a very simple, elementary portal that's going to enable possibly an NGO exchange in the future. The second thing is we'd like to understand what is a social stock exchange. There are two arms to it. One is a process of registration and the second is listing. So, and I would think that the biggest advantage, somebody might just ask, okay, I'm an NGO, I'm getting a donation. So why would I want to go to a stock exchange and go through this process to get myself listed to, get donations? The answer lies in a very nice term that's called credibility. When you're part of an exchange, that it significantly enhances the credibility of an organization, especially when the rating frameworks for these organizations are yet to take off in a way that we would have imagined. And India is a country where the number of NGOs just aren't enough. In addition to the government, we need this support. So I think the focus is primarily on the credibility. And so there's registration, there's listing, and how do you actually fundraise? So these are the broad ambit of topics that would be discussed today. And once again, here's a very hearty welcome to every one of you. And thanks to the speakers for being here. So it's over to Shweta. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks for your opening remarks. We would like to welcome our Central Council member, CA Dr. Anuj Goyalji, and Vice Chairman of Sustainability Reporting Standards Board for his keynote address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Sweta ji. I'm really very happy that we are having this maiden uh, virtual program, and we are having the best of the resource persons. I welcome all of you in today's webinar on this very important topic on social enterprises and the social stock exchange. And of course, the SRSP, Sustainability Reporting Standard Board, is trying its level best to see that how we can really do something very concrete in the field of the sustainability and the social audit. And today's event is particularly special as we have a distinguished panel of speakers and guests who will enlighten us with their insights and experience in this field. We are very well aware that Sustainability Reporting Standard Board was established very recently in February 20 and has been at the forefront of promoting sustainability and responsible business practices among enterprises. And one of the key initiatives undertaken by the SRSB is the ICI Sustainability Reporting Awards, which recognizes organizations that have excelled in sustainability reporting. And we are having Sri Priya ma'am as the chairperson of this very important board. We just had a meeting with the president also yesterday, and we are trying our level best to see that how we can really come up to the expectation of the stakeholders. And the SRSP is conducting online certificate course on sustainability and business responsibility reporting, BRSR, to enhance the knowledge and skills of professionals in this area, and is also organizing various sustainability awareness drives, capacity building programs, and webinars to promote the adoption of sustainable practices among businesses and professionals. And today's webinar focuses on the role of social enterprises in driving sustainable development and the importance of the social stock exchange in mobilizing capitals for these enterprises. We are privileged to have with us esteemed speakers who will share their expertise on these topics. And our honorable chairperson has already introduced Manjari Sabnis ji, a renowned expert in sustainability reporting, Hemant Gupta ji, MD and CEO of Equip Desi Investment Private Limited, Ramesh Swamiji, Director of SGBS at the Unnati Foundation, and Reema Agrawalji, Vice President of Unitas Capital. And I am really very happy that the best of the resource persons are with us on this very important topic. A very big round of applause for all of them. We are also joined by our esteemed members of the Regional Council. We are having the presence of C. Nitin Gupta ji, the Secretary of Central India Regional Council. We are having the presence of C. Navendu Garg ji, Chairman of the Ghaziabad branch of ICI. We are having the presence of C. Manish Agrawal ji, immediate past Chairman of the Ghaziabad branch, and C. Abhay Kansal ji, the Secretary of the Ghaziabad branch of the ICI. And friends, together we will explore the challenges and opportunities facing social enterprises, the role of professionals in supporting these enterprises, and the potential of the social stock exchange in driving sustainable development. And I hope that today's discussions will inspire all of us to contribute towards building a more sustainability and inclusive future. I will not be taking over further time as we are very eager to hear our learned guest speakers. I once again welcome all of you on behalf of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and Sustainability Reporting Standard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your enlightening words. Now, I would like to welcome C. Nitin Gupta ji, Secretary CIRC of ICI, to just introduce our speaker.
Thank you, ma'am. Respected Chairperson of SRSB Board, Shri Priya ma'am, Vice Chairman of SRSB Board, CA Dr. Anuj Goyal ji, and all the respected members, a very warm good afternoon to all of you. CA Hemant Gupta ji, MD CEO of Equip Investment and former head of BSc SSC. Hemant ji holds a management degree from IIM Calcutta and an engineering degree from IIT Madras. He was a head of social stock exchange at BSE and the managing director for BRTSIF. He has worked with a Citibank for a long time of 26 years, where he worked in a wide variety of functions, including a project management, technology, operation, and internal audit in India and also in North America. He was a member of working committee and technical group constituted by SEBI for setting up the stock exchange, social stock exchange in India. He is currently working as a head of SSE at BSE. With these words, I welcome Hemant Gupta ji.
Thank you very much, all of you. And a very good afternoon to the people who are listening on to this conversation. What I'll do is, we have quite a few interesting sessions ahead of us. In about 30 minutes, I'll try and introduce the concept of the social stock exchange, covering both the background, the history, as well as an overview of the architecture. And then, of course, Ramesh and Rima will enlighten you on the actual practical experience of being on the social stock exchange. So I'll share my screen. Give me just 1 minute. I hope all of you can see my screen.
Yes, sir.
All right. So what we'll do is we'll start by spending some time on the history of the Indian Social Stock Exchange. The journey really started in the interim budget speech 5 years ago by the Honorable Finance Minister in July 2019. And she, in her speech, talked about an electronic fundraising platform called a social stock exchange. There are a few things that are important in her speech that I'd like to highlight. One is that it would be under the regulatory ambit of SEBI, which is the regulator for the capital markets in India. And secondly, it would be for both social enterprises and voluntary organizations. In other words, for both for-profit and not-for-profit organizations. Shortly after this budget announcement, SEBI got into the act. They created a working committee that gave its report in about 9 months' time, in June of 2020. Broadly, the working committee worked on the overall architecture of the social stock exchange. Some of the key things that the working committee deliberated on were also lessons learned from social stock exchanges in other countries. 13 other countries had experimented with a social stock exchange before this. And I'll spend a few minutes talking about those, some of those countries. And the lessons learned from these other countries. Shortly after the working committee report, SEBI constituted a technical group that took the recommendations of the working committee and converted those into processes and procedures that the social stock exchange should follow. And we'll spend some time on those policies, procedures, and processes also. The technical group came out with its report again in about 9 months' time. And subsequently, in July of 2022, or about 18 months ago, the government finally came out with the notifications regarding the social stock exchange. Subsequent to which, both BSE and NSE applied for the licenses to open the social stock exchange. And BSE got its license in December of 22, and NSE got it in February of 23. And since then, quite a few NGOs have been registered, and yesterday, actually 5 NGOs got listed also on the social stock exchange. So let's first start by spending a little bit of time on the other countries that experimented with the social stock exchange, right? On your screen, there are 7 out of the 13 countries that floated a social stock exchange. 3 of them are in green and 4 are in red. The ones in greens are the ones that are still in existence. And the ones in red are the ones that were subsequently shut down. And let me just take an example of one in green on the left-hand side, Canada. So essentially, Canada launched the social stock exchange in 2013. It was called SVX, and it was meant for FPEs, or for-profit enterprises. And it's still in existence. Below that, again on the left-hand side, is Brazil, which was actually one of the earliest movers as far as social stock exchange is concerned. It was launched in 2003. It was called BVSA, and it was meant only for NGOs or not-for-profit organizations, NPOs. Right? Now you'll notice one thing about this map. The ones in green are all containing FPEs or were focused on for-profit enterprises. And the ones in red were all containing NPOs or focusing on NGOs, right? Now, that would probably seem intuitive given that a stock exchange is meant for financial returns, and an NGO, by its very nature, is unable to provide for financial returns, whereas for-profit enterprise is able to provide financial returns. So this is one of the backgrounds that when we were working on the Indian Social Stock Exchange, we had to think about how would we create a sustainable way for a not-for-profit organization to come onto the Social Stock Exchange. Let's spend a little more time on this before we move to the Indian Social Stock Exchange. Also, what was important about these other stock exchanges was they were broadly categorized into either matchmaking platforms, which meant that they did not have any trading or any financial activity happening. They were only meant to bring an NGO with a donor matchmaking. The second type were alternate investment platforms. In other words, they were not mainstream stock exchanges, but were alternate investment platforms. And in all cases, both matchmaking and alternate investment, they were separate platforms. Trading in case of matchmaking was, of course, not allowed. And for alternate investment, there was limited amount of trading that was possible, right? In this context, and this slide will become important when we go to the next one, it is in this context that we designed the Indian Social Stock Exchange. So what did we do? So like I said, first a working committee was established. It was under the chairmanship of P. Ishaq Hussain. And in June 2020, when the working committee came out with its 70+ page report, some of the more important recommendations are what you see on your screen. There were a host of recommendations. I've pulled out 3 that were relevant for this session today. First, SSE or Social Stock Exchange would be a segment under the existing stock exchanges. In other words, BSE and NSE. Remember what the slide said, that these were separate platforms. But the Indian Social Stock Exchange would be a part of the existing stock exchange, which meant that it would inherit a time-tested governance and operating framework and only required minor changes to make it suitable for the social sector. We did not have to reinvent the wheel. And I think this will be a key contributor to the sustainability of this segment. Second, given that the stock exchange or the capital market is something that is completely new to the social sector, especially to the NGOs, we should set up a capacity building fund. The capacity building fund should be focused on working with NGOs to educate them on the stock exchanges, specifically the SSE, and how to avail of the platform. But equally importantly, build awareness amongst investors and donors as to what is this animal called the social stock exchange and what are the benefits of them participating in it. The capacity building fund was launched about a year ago under NABARD and has already started working on its mandate. The third, very importantly, was that today an NGO receives its monies through donations and grants. But donations and grants are not something that exists on a stock exchange. So a new instrument was introduced called the Zero Coupon Zero Principle or ZCZP instrument. And deliberately it was called an instrument and not a bond, because a bond has other connotations. Zero coupon meaning, of course, that there's no interest to be earned on this instrument, and zero principal implying that you don't get your money back, you don't get the principal back. So therefore, the ZCZP instrument would be a method for listing of donations and grants onto the social stock exchange. And Mr. Swami will talk more about the ZCZP they listed, Unnati listed. which was the first listing on the social stock exchange. The technical group, the second group that was formed, took the recommendations of the working committee and expanded on it by drilling it down to processes and procedures. And again, they had a 70+ page report. There are four important items that I have picked. One was that today in India, there's no legal definition of what is a social enterprise. And therefore, we had to create a definition of who could qualify, what kind of organization would qualify for coming onto the social stock exchange. And this was called the primacy of social intent, and we'll talk a little more about it. Second, any company or organization coming onto a stock exchange has to make financial disclosures and other risk-related disclosures. The fact that a social enterprise is supposed to make a social impact, what we introduced were impact-related disclosures, so that the people who are putting money into these social enterprises are aware of the impact that is getting created. Third, the fact that there is a financial auditor that verifies or validates or audits the financial performance of an organization. We introduced the concept of a social auditor, not a financial auditor, a completely different entity, now also called a social assessor, for validating the social impact that's getting created by a social enterprise. And lastly, there was a AIF structure called the Social Venture Fund. We also recommended some changes to it to make it more market friendly. Right? Now, both of these committees, of course, consulted a lot of people from the social development ecosystem, and the SRSP was an integral part of the discussions, especially the technical group. Right? So, what did all of this result in? And I'm going to go through this a little fast because Mr. Swami will spend a lot more time on this. So, essentially, the architecture of the social stock exchange, the first step, like I mentioned before, is you establish primacy of social intent, the fact that you are a social enterprise. Once you have established that, on the left is the path for NGOs or NPOs. On the right is the path for for-profit enterprises. On the right path is quicker to handle because we did not make any changes to the existing stock exchange. Just like any commercial for-profit enterprise lists on the stock exchange, a social for-profit enterprise would follow a similar path, right? And depending on their size and net worth, they would either go on the main board, the SME, or the startup segment. They would be able to list equity, debt, or other instruments that may be applicable. On the other hand, on the left side, the NGO path or the NPO path was not something that existed before. So we created it in two steps. The first step is the registration step, and the second step is the listing or the fundraising step. And the reason why it was broken up into two steps is that typically an NGO or an NPO has multiple projects for which they want to do fundraise. So rather than having to comply with all the guidelines multiple times, every time they do a fundraise, we broke it up into two parts. You register once, the organization, and then you can raise funds as many times as you want. And of course, the fundraising is either through these social ZCZPs or social venture funds. Let's spend a little bit of time on this step, the primacy of social intent, and then we'll go down the NPO path in more detail. Okay, so there are broadly three filters for NPO to qualify. One is that they have to be working in 16 broad areas that are similar to what you would see in Schedule 7, which is the CSR sectors, SDG goals, Niti Aayog priority areas. These are the 16 sectors, like I said, hunger, health, education. You'll find the usual suspects, but you'll also find some others like welfare of migrants, digital divide on the internet that we've added, which are more relevant in the current context. Right, so first is the organization has to be working in one or more of these 16 areas. Second is that at least 2/3 of their work, or 67% of their revenue, expenses, or beneficiaries should be coming from these areas of focus. Third, we barred certain organizations, at least initially, from being on the social stock exchange. These include political or religiously affiliated organizations, corporate foundations, professional trade bodies like the Board of Control of Cricket of India, as an example, infrastructure and housing companies, except those in affordable housing. An additional criteria was that the enterprise should target underserved or less privileged population segments. So once you qualified on this, then depending on whether you're a for-profit or not for-profit, you would go down the right or left. What we will do is we'll go down the left. And Mr. Swami will elaborate on this. So I'll do this very quickly. To register, an NPO must be a society, trust, or section 8. Again, you will see that these are what you would find in section 135 also. Right? Track record of 3 years, 12A, ATG. But we also added a size criteria, given that two things. One is that there are additional compliance and governance requirements for any organization coming onto a stock exchange. And second is the fact that a stock exchange does not raise funds for anybody. Right? It's a platform on which fundraising can happen. Therefore, the organization must have a capability of raising its own funds. So a minimum size of 50 lakhs and a minimum fundraise of 10 lakhs. This is the registration process. Again, there's a portal. Both the stock exchanges have a portal. You can go there, register your interest. They'll send you a checklist of what all documents are required. You submit them. They get reviewed. And then upon successful review, you get registered. So you are now registered. You can start fundraising, which is the security listing part. Right. So I've given an example of a ZCZP on how you raise funds for a ZCZP. Right. So they must have a valid registration. You drop an email, right? And then you'll get a checklist, a toolkit actually, which includes something called an offer document template, which is similar to a proposal document you would write when you want to do a fund, when you want to go to a donor, right? You submit your documentation. The stock exchange will review, and upon successful completion would approve the issue. And then whenever the NGO is ready, then they would open the issue and then investors could invest in the ZCZP. Yeah, have tried to keep the process as simple as possible. There is no requirement of a merchant banker as of now for the listing of a ZCZP. Of course, it is advisable that you consult an expert who's familiar with this process when you're doing this, at least for the first time. Perhaps after that, you could do this on your own. And I think we have one such expert who's going to be speaking subsequently. What are the key characteristics? Minimum issue size, or the minimum amount of fundraise you can do is 50 lakhs. Minimum amount a donor or an investor can give is 10,000. By the way, these used to be much higher. And based on public demand, SEBI has reduced these limits. Like anything else on the stock exchange, the issue will be in demat form. Minimum issue subscription is 75%. And the ZCZP will terminate once the object for which the funds received have been met. And because it's in demat form, it'll actually appear in the demat statement of the donor, but with a value of 0, because obviously it's a donation, therefore doesn't have a value. I'll not spend too much time on social impact fund. It's similar to a mutual fund, but for securities listed on the social stock exchange. This is an example of a social development bond. Again, something that's probably coming up in the future, and we can reserve this for a subsequent conversation. These are further details of the same. For-profit listing, very similar to what a regular listing is on the stock exchange, except of course that this is meant for social enterprises, and therefore they also have to do impact reporting. Listing documents, again, very similar to what you have for a regular listing, except that there's an additional requirement for differentiators that a social enterprise has to provide. And these are the differentiators, primarily focusing on what the organization's capabilities are: vision, target segment, strategy, governance, etc. right? And all of these you can find in the regulations that SEBI has come out with. Now, very importantly, I referred to the fact that any social enterprise has to make additional disclosures by being on the stock exchange, right? So I've tried to summarize this in one slide. So on the left side, you have the frequency of the disclosures. So one is the one-time registration disclosures, annual, quarterly, event-based, and annual impact report. You would notice that for a for-profit enterprise, these disclosures are as per the existing regulations for a commercial enterprise. But for an NPO, they differ based on whether you're just registered or whether you've raised money also. Right? So in case you're only registered, you provide this information. And then if you're registered and listed, then you provide all these details. The one disclosure that I'd like to bring your attention to is the event-based disclosure, where any event that has a material impact on either the functioning of the organization, if you're registered only, or impacting the project for which funds have been raised, if you're listed also, has to be declared to the stock exchange within 7 days of the event. Furthermore, the bottom row, there's an annual impact report that covers broadly the progress that the NPO has made in its during the year. That has to be submitted within 90 days of the financial year end. Again, the formats for all these are available in the regulations that are there. So that's a quick, very high level overview of the social stock exchange. I've tried to cover as much as I could in the allotted 30 minutes. I'm going to be around in case you have any questions that you'd like to ask. With that, I'll hand it back to the SRSP team. Shweta, back to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for.
Shweta, can I just take a minute here? Just
Yes,
a minute. Yeah, just a small 3 questions which seem to have popped up very
Yes.
quickly. So an FP has an option to list either on the social stock exchange or on the main stock exchange.
Yes.
Right. So okay, so then it would be up to the organization to decide. The second thing is you had mentioned that the ZP will get terminated either on task or time completion. So if the task is over, then obviously the money has got spent. But if the time is over and the task is not over, will the donor get it refunded or how does it?
No. So typically what will happen, CPI, is that the NGO, because they need to maintain a track record on the stock exchange, will extend the timeline of the ZP until the task is done.
And the third question, so very quickly, you had mentioned about these material changes which need to get reported, etc. Is the entire format digital, or does somebody have to mail as SEBI or the SSC or something like that? Is it a digital?
So there's something called the listing portal that both the stock exchanges have. The reporting of the event takes place through something called the compliance portion of that listing.
Excellent. So thank you very much, sir. I thought it'll be relevant to ask these questions now before we conclude the session. But it was really nice. Thanks.
There are a couple of other questions. How to become a social stock exchange certified auditor? I think there's a subsequent session on that, right?
Yes.
So we'll skip that for now. Okay, so the second question actually is an interesting one. So if you don't mind, I'll just quickly share my screen. I have time, right, Shripriya?
Yes, you do.
Yeah. Okay. It's an important question. Okay, yeah. So the 2 or 3 things that we have done differently to ensure that NPOs actually will have a significant role to play on the social stock exchanges. Introduction of the zero coupon, zero principal instrument. No other country enabled an NPO to actually list on the stock exchange. Okay. Second, creating a resource for NPOs to actually be able to understand and why they should list and how they should list. Equally importantly, a resource that educates donors and investors onto why the social stock exchange is important. Again, nobody else did that. Third, the social auditor concept, right? The fact that I, as a donor or investor, am actually able to see the impact my money is creating, and therefore allowing me greater, to use Sripriya's earlier language, credibility and transparency into what is happening with my money, thereby giving me comfort in terms of putting money into an NPO through the social stock exchange. And last but not the least, the fact that the SSC is a segment under the stock exchange and not a separate platform, right? And therefore carries with it the full weight of the regulations, the SEBI oversight, and all of that comes with being on a stock exchange, and thereby again giving comfort to investors. See, ultimately, the success or failure of a capital market platform depends on if it's able to attract investors or donors. If it is able to do that successfully, the issuers or the people who look for money or raising money will come. And the primary focus, which is a lot of it was missing in the other countries, in our architecture was to build in things that would give comfort to an investor or a donor that it's good to go through the social stock exchange. It's better to go through the social stock exchange. Okay. I'll stop.
Thanks, Hemant. I think that was very helpful. Also, because you compare it with 135, I think the impact assessment is only for projects 1 crore and above.
1 crore and above, yeah.
So it's really nice because then ideally, I think a donor would want to go through a social stock exchange. Ideally. So yeah, thanks. Thank you so much. And it's over to Shweta.
Thank you, sir. Now we would like to, request the CA Nivendu Garg ji, Chairman Ghaziabad branch of CIRC of ICI, to introduce the speaker.
Thank you. First of all, good afternoon to all. I congratulate the respected Sripriya ma'am for conducting such a good webinar. I congratulate CA Dr. Anuj Goyal ji for conducting such a good type of webinar, which will help the members for their knowledge. It is my pleasure to introduce CA Manjari Sabnis to all of you. CA Manjari Sabnis qualified in 1998. She is having 25 years experience in corporate finance. She is having diploma in software technology from INIT in 1995. She is having certificate in capital market from NIM SMC. She is having business responsibility and sustainability reporting certificate by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India in year 2023. She worked as an independent consultant since 2020. She is having skills in finance, strategic planning, budgeting, MIS, statutory compliance, risk management, project leadership, and administration. With these words, I introduce CA Manjari Sabnis to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Mr. Garg. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to start sharing my screen to...
Could you please reposition your camera because we can see you better?
Yeah. Yes. Can you see me better now?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Manjari.
Thanks for the introduction. I'd like to share the screen before I can start the presentation. Give me a second.
There's this little box called View at the right. If you go there, you can find your floating meeting controls.
Yeah. I think I'm able to see that now. Just give me a minute.
Yeah, chill. You'd have to go and click on this. You found it?
Yeah, I found it. Problem here is, I'm unable to shift to another screen right now of on the internet.
Okay, so no problem. You can try for some more time. Would you just send me your presentation? What's your mail ID?
No. What I'll do is I will share a PDF of it.
Oh, no problem. Anything is fine.
Okay? I'm so sorry to keep you waiting.
No, just relax, Manjari. It's absolutely fine. Absolutely fine.
Yeah, is it visible now and am I audible?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you so much. And sorry for this deep glitch.
Nothing at all. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. So the topic for presentation today is the social enterprises in India and the role of social auditors. I'd like to take a moment to go through the brief synopsis of what I'd like to present today. So I'd like to touch upon the definition of social enterprises. Actually, I understand the previous speaker has already enlightened us on it, but so I'll quickly run through it and maybe bring out a few nuances for beginners who would have joined this session, and then a little about the eligibility criteria. Then I would like to emphasize a little more about what the role of a social impact assessor is, what social impact assessment implies, and how the impact reporting needs to be done. So what is a social enterprise? In the common parlance, as we all understand, and as the name suggests, it's basically an organization which is focused on social welfare and not so much on profit maximization. But SEBI has come out with a specific definition, as explained by Hemant sir earlier. So it basically refers to NPOs, that is non-profit organizations, or FPSEs, for-profit social enterprises, which comply with the other eligibility criteria laid down by SEBI. And FPSEs, as we understand, are corporates, but they do not include Section 8 companies. So they are corporates which work for profit, but in the social sector. And non-profit organizations are basically either charitable trusts, as per registered under Indian Trust Act, or the state statutory act, relevant statute of the state for charitable trusts, for societies, charitable societies registered under the Societies Registration Act, and Section 8 companies, or some other bodies that may be specified by the board from time to time. So this is as per the ICDR regulations of SEBI. The criteria also have been shared in the earlier presentation, so I would not spend that much time on it, but rather move on to what the areas are for NPOs or for FPSEs to be identified or as can qualify to be called as social enterprises under the ambit of SEBI. So there are 17 areas, basically 16 thematic areas and one broad area where, which could be specified from time to time by the board. And these 16 areas correspond with the 16 thematic areas which are laid down for the social audit standards by ICAI. So each thematic area has a corresponding social audit standard, which can be referred to by all social impact assessors to really conduct their assessment. So it gives them ideas on all the steps in conducting the assessment, the indicative impact indicators, qualitative indicators, quantitative indicators, so that it is a kind of guide to help impact assessors to conduct their assessment. And they can also refer to the social audit framework. So basically, these thematic areas have been chosen, as per my understanding, by the government, where they expected, the capital to be. They expected more capital inflow because these areas have been identified as priority areas of development by either the center or the state, and in alignment with the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. So that is where. So doesn't mean that the other areas of social development are not encouraged, but these have been identified as priority areas, and most of the organizations would fall under either of these areas. So in the later part of the presentation, the appendix, I have also shared a mapping of these areas with the social audit standards and the sustainability development goals. I can take a moment to go there and just share the mapping with you all. Please feel free to chat and post questions. Yeah. So before we go to social audit standards and mapping with SDGs, I would also like to draw your attention to a social audit framework, which has been issued by ICAI in 2023 itself. And that also gives guidance to all the stakeholders of the social enterprises in getting these social impact assessments done. So when we talk about stakeholders, let me just clarify that we do not just imply donors or impact funders, but basically the social enterprises, their management, the employees, volunteers, trainers, actually the actual beneficiaries, the beneficiary families, groups, local authorities, politicians. So it's that entire microcosm that we are referring to when we talk about stakeholders. And so all these stakeholders can actually benefit from social audit framework, social audit standards, and social impact assessment in general. So I was to share this mapping of SDGs and social audit standards. Like, for example, the first thematic area that was identified, eradicating hunger, poverty, malnutrition, and inequality. The SAS 100 is based on this thematic area, and it can be mapped to Sustainability Development Goal 1 and 2, which is no poverty and no hunger. Similarly, all other areas, so I've shared a detailed mapping for anyone who might be interested. SAS 800, for example, supporting incubators of social enterprises. So this is basically to support more and more social enterprises to develop and flourish in their areas and progress. And that can be mapped to SDG 9, which is industry, innovation, and infrastructure. So all the NPOs or FPSCs operating in these areas will be able to register as social enterprises with the Social Stock Exchange, provided they qualify as per the other eligibility criteria also. So eligibility criteria, when we say 67% of their activities, 67% of the activities of the social enterprise have to be directed towards the targeted beneficiary group. I would like to elaborate a little further on this. How do we calculate the 67%? Either it could be in terms of revenue, so past 3 years revenue, if you take average of that, and 67% of it is directed towards providing products or services to the targeted beneficiary group, then that can be considered as an organization having social intent as a primacy of social intent. Second one is from the expenditure point of view, that 67% of the last 3 years average expenditure is towards benefiting these target beneficiary groups, or 67% of the targeted users of the products or services of the social enterprise are from the targeted beneficiary group. If any of these conditions are satisfied, then we can say that this organization has established a primacy of social intent, in addition to they serving the most underserved sections of the population and less privileged sections of the population, and working in this 16 thematic areas. So as long as these conditions are satisfied, the organization can qualify itself to be identified as social enterprise. So, a quick overview of social enterprises in India. As we now know, on the Bombay Stock Exchange, the social stock exchange platform, more than 30 NPOs have already registered. On the National Stock Exchange, social stock exchange platform, more than 50 NPOs have already registered. And I just heard from some of the speakers that some 5 listings are supposed to take place, and they've, and I think they're already NPOs which are like SGVS Unnati Foundation, Akhanda Jyoti Foundation, Swami Vivekanand Youth Movement and Lighthouse Communities Foundation. They've already listed on the SSE for funding. And we have the director of Unnati Foundation as our next speaker, so he would be able to enlighten us more on this. But there are foundations which have already taken that path. Darpan portal, of course, has more than 1 lakh of NGOs registered, so that can give us some idea of the size of the sector in India. And there's this German group called Bertelsmann and Stiftung. They have come up with a publication which said that there are more than 2 million social enterprises in India, and is one of the most dynamic social entrepreneurship environments globally. So that is the level of that is the scope of social sector right now in India. Is growing further, and as the social stock exchange and all activities are maturing, I think more and more funds will be diverted towards these specific thematic areas, and there will be additional, it is at least the scenario at the moment looks encouraging that more and more funds would be diverted to the expected development areas through this platform of social stock exchange. And more social enterprises will explore the platform. So who's a social impact assessor? As per SEBI ICDR guidelines, initially it was defined that there will be a social auditor, but as per the recent amendments, with effect from 21st December 2023, the person would be called, that individual would be called a social impact assessor. And who is a social impact assessor? It's a person who was registered with a self-regulatory organization under the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India or such other body. And that person should have completed a certification program of the National Institute of Social Securities Markets, specifically for this purpose, for social auditor. So right now, the SRO under ICAI is the Institute of Social Auditors of India. I'm a member of it. So the way to get membership is basically appear for this certification exam conducted by National Institute of Securities Market for Social Auditors. And with that valid certification, apply to the ISAI for membership of the organization. For us chartered accountants and other professionals, we do not need to submit a proof of experience in the development sector, but other professionals or postgraduates or graduates need to submit those proofs as well. So once all these proofs are submitted, we become a member of the Institute of Social Auditors of India. And just like ICAI, the other professional bodies like the CS Institute and CMA Institute have also come up with their SROs. But right now, the most active one is the Institute of Social Auditors of India. So all other professionals are also registering under ICAI at the moment. And which form can act as a social impact assessment form? The one which employs social impact assessors and has been conducting social impact assessments for at least a period of 3 years. So that firm can also become a social impact assessor. And now that we know which organizations, whether they are NPOs or FPSCs, can register under under SEBI as social enterprises, and we also know who can be a social impact assessor. But we also need to understand what is social impact assessment. So United Nations Environment Program, which is one of the pioneering bodies in this area, they came up with a definition in 2007, and that was the most widely accepted definition in this field of a social impact assessment. It says that it's a process of research, planning, and management of consequences of social change, whether positive or negative, intended or unintended, arising from policies, plans, projects, and developments. So why is it a process of research? Because every social impact assessor needs to know about the background of the social enterprise, the project that they are trying to implement, what is the problem, social problem that they are trying to solve, the level of the problem, the geography in which they operate. So they need to know a lot about the project and its intended impact so that a thorough assessment can be made. So it involves, obviously, we looked at different thematic areas, and each impact assessor is unlikely to have full knowledge on all these areas. So process of research is involved, planning, because it is better that an impact assessor is involved right from the beginning of the project till the end of the time frame which needs to be assessed, because one needs the baseline data and the before and after scenarios for comparison. Otherwise, how would one arrive at a effective conclusion as to whether the desired impact, desired social change has been achieved or not? So and it's all has to be based on the data. So the data has to be requested and it has to be obtained in a and the data basically has to be maintained by the social enterprise with as much rigor as financial data is maintained. Only then can a thorough social impact assessment be done. And of course, to understand the theory of change map, which is basically a social impact monitoring framework, from that perspective also it is better if the assessor is involved from the planning stage. And the management of social change. So when we talk about management of social change, it means although the primary responsibility of managing social change is on the social enterprise, the role of the impact assessor is to guide if there are any misfits or improvisations that are to be made, or some changes to be made to the project based on their impact assessment, so that in future, the social welfare is maximized. So if there are any issues that need to be fixed, or there are some areas which have not been effectively executed within the project, then it is the job of the social impact assessor to highlight these consequences so that there can be some future course correction by the social enterprise. So in that sense, it is a process of management of social change. What are the consequences, positive and negative, intended, unintended? So we'll just take one example to understand all different types of consequences so that we know what to include in our assessments. Let's say there's a youth skilling program operating in a rural area, and it goes on for a year with unemployed youth. At the end of the year gets skilled. So the positive consequence obviously is, like, let's say 80% of them get employment. So that's a positive consequence. But there will also be a negative consequence. Let's say they were initially helping their family with their traditional vocation or agriculture. So suddenly they will be drawn out of that family vocation, and which means their family vocation might suffer. So, for example, if youth from all the rural areas start flocking to cities, then there'll be congestion in the cities, and the agricultural productivity might reduce because the generation is all not focused on their traditional vocation. So these are some negative consequences. They are either intended or unintended. Intended is fine, but unintended also can be positive or negative. If in that youth skilling program, just because the youth are gainfully employed, they are away from addiction, so then that's a positive, although unintended consequence. But at the same time, there could be a negative unintended consequence also, like we discussed. It happens all the time, so that also needs to be understood, highlighted in the reports in such a way that it will enable future course correction. And why is the social impact assessment helpful, and to whom is it helpful? It is helpful to planners, project proponents, impacted populations. So most of all, it's supposed to maximize. All these social projects are intended at maximizing social welfare. So if it is observed that it is this social enterprise is unable to achieve the desired social change, either within the given time frame or in general it's failing as a project, then it is and the impact assessor has highlighted all the issues, then the faster it course corrects, the higher the benefit will be to the targeted population, and it will end up achieving its goal at the earliest. But it is also important in understanding whether the project is the right fit for the targeted population. So once an impact assessment is done, it can easily highlight whether there was the logic behind the project was strong enough, and it is really adding value to the in a way that was expected by the donors. For example, if there's a project targeting watershed management in a cluster of villages to improve the agricultural conditions in those villages. And let's say one of those villages is not primarily involved in agriculture, and their occupation is, let's say, primary occupation is tourism or some other vocation, craftsmanship or some such thing, then this project is not applicable to the village. So the resources spent in the cluster development are a waste on the beneficiaries of that village. So this is what comes out after the impact assessment is done. And that will help help in avoiding any inappropriate allocation of resources also. But once the successful impact assessment is conducted, it is helpful to all the stakeholders. One, helping the management to understand and the donors to understand whether the original stated intent of the project has been fulfilled. If it has been fulfilled, it is really motivating to all the stakeholders, including the employees, the beneficiaries, of course. So much so that it is kind of celebration of their efforts and their success. At the same time, it can also serve as a prototype which can be followed by other organizations, or it can be used, that impact assessment report can be used as a tool to secure further funding and expand the activities of the organization. Or if it is not such a favorable report, then there will be a root cause analysis, and the efforts will be directed towards fixing the issues. So in that sense, corrective actions can be recommended. Also, it helps in understanding whether the implementation is, the performance of the implementers is, whether they are achieving effective implementation, whether the resources that have been allocated towards the project have been effectively utilized in the most optimized way. And of course, recommendations for improvements in the measurement methodology as well as improvements in the project itself will come about. So a lot of pluses, plus it also fosters some kind of belongingness of all the stakeholders to the project, because then everybody's points of view gets understood, discussed, debated. So it in general, the process will help in improvising the project implementation. So it is, like I said earlier, it is obviously very useful for social impact assessors to use the social audit standards. And in fact, when the projects are listed on the social stock exchange, it is imperative that these standards are used to conduct the impact assessment. And all these standards have the structure where it has 4 sections. First part is introduction. So it gives the objective and the scope of a specific thematic area on which the standard is based. Then the second part is the actual evaluation of social impact. When the actual evaluation is taking place, what are the steps that one needs to go through? One is the data collection. So standard specific or thematic area specific, how the data is to be collected, what is the sampling size, depending upon the geography, depending upon the scale of operations. What are the methods through which data can be collected, surveys, questionnaires, personal interviews, focus group discussions. Then it is followed by a desk review of documents which are already made available by the social enterprise. It also is within the role of a social impact assessor to state right at the outset what are the documents and what is the kind of cooperation that would be required from the social enterprise, what kind of data will be required, and that how that data needs to be maintained and at what points in time to enable an effective assessment. So in that evaluation of social impact, one also needs to evaluate whether the questionnaire or the questions are adequately capturing all the aspects of the project, and it will lead us to the proper measurement of the impact indicators. Impact indicators as in they will at every stage of a project, at the input level, the output level, outcome level, impact level, there will be indicators which suggest whether that step of the project has been successfully completed or not. And such impact indicators, key impact indicators, whether they are quantitative impact indicators or qualitative impact indicators, they are given in the social audit standards pertaining to all thematic areas. So based on these impact indicators, there will be a measurement compared with the baseline data and the data at the end of the time frame. There will be a comparison, and from which there will be an assessment, and findings will be available, critical findings as to what the project has achieved in the given time frame. So that is more or less the methodology of evaluation of social impact. Section 3 will refer to the assessment of challenges and limitations in conducting the assessment. And section 4 is basically an appendix, which, it gives the mapping of taxonomical classification of that thematic area with NITI Aayog's targets and all of that. So please let me know if you have any questions before I proceed. So we talked about the steps in conducting social impact assessment as per the social audit standards, but thematically, there are 5 steps involved in the process, which we should look at as a social impact assessor. First is setting the objectives. So for any new assignment, we need to first, or any new engagement for social impact assessment, it could be either the entire impact assessment or any part of it. One needs to follow these 5 steps. One is setting the objectives. So it's about understanding what problem that social enterprise is trying to solve, what is the level of the problem in the given geography, and based on which and what is the extent to which it is trying to solve the problem in the given time frame, based on which we can define the scope of our social impact assessment. Then we analyze the stakeholders, which means that we have a dialogue with all the stakeholders. Stakeholders, like I mentioned earlier, are all those entities, right from donors, funders, risk funders, impact funders, the social enterprise and its management, employees, volunteers, capacity builders, trainers, and the beneficiary group, their families, their context, local authorities, etc., etc. So all of them, one needs to have a dialogue with to understand what their expectations are as outcome or impact from the project, and we prioritize the desired impacts and choose a few for assessment. Choose the top priority impacts for assessment. And then we start with the whole process of measurement. The process of measurement we discussed in detail a while ago. So we start with the whole process of measurement. Then we verify and value whether, the logical implications of the entire project are strong enough and are valued by the impact funders and the donors. And that is probably, is it what they really wanted? And how much is it in alignment with their stated social intent? Then there is monitoring and reporting. So end of it all is impact reporting. It's a very important document, the social impact assessment report, and we'll see in a while what it should contain, I think, the contents of the report. What it helps us do is, that impact report, whether the vision, mission of the organization, the goals that have been set have been achieved, whether the functioning is efficient, and what can be improved further. It's kind of it is helpful in making organizations learning organizations. And what are the principal components of impact reporting? One is an executive summary, which is aimed at all the stakeholders. So it talks about the organization, what it does, its progress so far, what it is expecting to achieve in the given time frame of assessment, what is the scope of the social impact assessment, stakeholder involvement, what is the responsibility of each of the stakeholders in conducting the assessment, the methodology of assessment, the process that will be deployed. If any fieldwork agencies have been, if any work is outsourced to any expert or fieldwork agency, then that also needs to be mentioned. The impact map or the theory of change map, as we talked about, that has to be included ideally in the impact report. Assumptions, limitations of conducting the assessment have to be shared at the outset. If there are some important decisions that are being taken by the social enterprise in the project implementation, the audit trail for making such decisions and the documentation, that also has to be shared. And then the impact scorecard, what was expected to be achieved, what has been achieved. It does not have to be a target versus actual comparison, but it can be a comparison with the earlier reporting period. So that will give an idea of the performance of the current year or the current reporting time frame. And it can have testimonials of beneficiaries. It can have case studies of organizations working in the similar area. It can also carry a trend analysis of the current performance, the past performance, so that the social trends can be helpful in the future implementation of the project. Midline assessments, baseline assessments. So all of that, course correction requirements, if any. Basically, a positive trend will kind of encourage all those stakeholders, and it will attract future investments. Or it can be an example for other social enterprises operating in that sector. Similarly, something has not worked out, like in any audit, there'll be a root cause analysis and recommendations for improvement. So all in all, this report will help in understanding the project implementation and improving it for the future. So that is, what it is directed at. It is, of course, in some cases it is mandatory, some cases it is voluntary. It is helpful to all. Let's see where it's, let's just discuss for a minute where it is mandatory and where it is voluntary. If a particular project is listed on the social stock exchange, it is mandatory for that social enterprise to get a social impact assessment conducted of their annual impact report. So this is where it's mandatory. Of course, CSR projects of corporates which have more than 10 crore obligation, 10 crore CSR obligation in the earlier 3 financial years, then every project above 1 crore needs to be assessed and impact assessment needs to be done. So that is again a mandate, and that is what has created an opportunity for the social impact assessors. But apart from that, impact funders and all big donors may want to have an impact assessment done for, especially if they are social venture capital funds, or if large amounts of capital has been donated to certain specific social enterprises, then they would want this kind of impact assessment to be done. Although, like we discussed a while ago, there are multiple benefits to all stakeholders, and it is recommended that impact assessments can be done by maximum number of social enterprises. So this is all that I was planning to cover in the session today. If you have any questions on this topic, please post it in the chat box. I don't see any questions here. So thank you all for being with me in this session. And thank you all the dignitaries of the CA Institute and SRSP, chairperson, vice chairperson, and all other dignitaries and all other speakers for being a part of the session and allowing me this opportunity to speak here. I can see one comment in the chat box. Yeah. Question is to me, yeah. How would we map the SIA reporting to the ESG sustainability reporting? Do you believe the actual outcome of the ESG sustainability initiatives of corporates and the related SIA related donation should be exclusive and not get duplicated? How do you think this can be achieved? So yeah, there are 2 things. One is ESG reporting either in the BRSR format or in sub-GRI or any other ESG reporting framework, which is done by corporates. Now, BRSR is mandatory for top 10,000 companies by market capitalization. They have their own assurance requirements now, top 150 companies and all. So that is basically reporting on the ESG performance of the company. And here we are talking about a social impact assessment of CSR projects of corporates or of social enterprises. So when we're talking about social enterprises, you're talking about NPOs or FPSEs, and to which BRSR or GRI are not applicable usually, or integrated reporting or whichever other ESG reporting framework is not usually applicable. So they are, even if social enterprises are, using frameworks like GRI or whatever, BRSR cannot be confused with it because BRSR is very much in the corporate domain. And these social enterprises typically, there is a small overlap where, for-profit social enterprises, which are corporates, may have a BRSR reporting requirement, but there is a thin chance of that because BRSR is for those huge companies, and they are not they are profit maximizing companies only. They are not for-profit social enterprises. So the only overlap where possible overlap is where your CSR mandates social impact assessments, and that company may already have their ESG reporting. But it is better to keep these two things separate, because ESG performance, when you're reporting, you're talking about the overall company's labor practices, their own employee well-being, whether it is based on that national guidelines for responsible business conduct, right? So it's all about talking about the sustainability of the product or service, right, from the life cycle of the the product or service. So all of that is not applicable to a particular project, which a CSR project which that corporate might have undertaken. So it is better to keep these two things separate. Although there might be some level of duplication, it's better to keep these two things separate, according to me. I hope I have answered your question. The social impact assessment specifically, it will be related to one thematic area. Let's say if it is regarding, improving the health of a particular village or whatever, improving the health and sanitation facilities and providing medical assistance to all the villages in one particular geography. In BRSR report, you will not be reporting on that. You will be reporting on the performance of the corporate as a whole, and not of the impact that it has caused on the targeted beneficiaries. You might just have one link of a story in the BRSR report. I hope I have addressed this question.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. If there are any no further questions, I'd like to take your leave. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Now we would like to request CA Manish Agarwalji, immediate past chairman, Ghaziabad branch, to introduce the next speaker. Manish, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Thanks, ma'am. Highly respected CA Sripriya, ma'am, Chairperson SRSB. Highly respected CA Dr. Anuj Goyal ji, Vice Chairperson SRSB, and other speakers and members. I hope you all are having pleasant day. It's my pleasure to get an opportunity to introduce Mr. Ramesh Swamy with you. Mr. Ramesh Swamy, Chief Operating Officer of the Swamy Group of Companies, understood the potentially catastrophic ramification of this. He also understood that the problem was not one of employment, but of unemployability. This understanding, combined with his deep-seated passion to help the youth of the country, translated into Unnati program in the year 2023. As a founding member of the SGBS Trust in 1993, Mr. Ramesh Swamy played a key role in its development. The Unnati program was started as an initiative of the trust, with the aim empowering underprivileged youth to pull themselves and their families out of poverty forever. With Mr. Swamy, a lead trustee and director, Unnati has grown from small efforts out of two-bedroom house into a movement with more than 40 centers across the India. UNXT, a training program for the government college final year youth with the assured placement, is an offshoot of this expansion, which has helped the organization grow rapidly in the last couple of years. In last 15 years, Unnati has trained and placed over 80,000 youth across the country. In the present financial year, the organization under his leadership attempting to touch 1 lakh youths. One of the significant achievements of the credit of Mr. Ramesh Swamy is the initiative to get SVF registered and listed in the stock exchange, Social Stock Exchange of India. SVF is the first NGO to achieve this remarkable feat in the country and created history. With strong leadership skill, an inspiring attitude and unbounded energy, Mr. Ramesh Swamy today is one of those few who has touched many lives in the country. Now with these words, I welcome to Mr. Ramesh Swamy, sir. Over to sir. Hello.
Thanks a lot. Thank you so much. I am so honored to be amongst so many great, wonderful luminaries. Thank you. Should I start, or we'll wait for Rima ji to be introduced and then take it forward together?
Sir, you can start, sir.
Okay, fine. So I I will take you through a small journey. Many of the points have been covered about the announcement, how SSC is different, our SSC is different. I would like to talk about why an NPO must be on the SSC. This is something which I feel very strongly about, and that is what made us take it up. One, as I told, many people have talked about it. They talked about credibility. You talked about trust deficit. You talked about governance, the social impact. So these are some of the reasons why we felt that we should be there. And when we talk about transparency, governance, compliance, and social impact outcome, these are some very key elements which every NPO must reflect on and ensure that these are aspects which are there so that you take up this journey of being part of the SSC. The moment we talk about SSC, a lot of NGOs who are here, who are hearing, apart from the CAs and who are advisors to these NGOs, the question which will come from an NPO is, why should I be there? One, I am getting donations already. The donations are coming from my own people. I am giving them report, they are accepting it. In the SSC, there is no benefit to my donor. He is not getting any advantage by donating to us. My cost of operations because of the initial registration and listing process. Listing is a costly affair. It could cost you anywhere between 5 to 10 lakh rupees. And then the subsequent disclosures, which continue in the financial years, could cost another 10 lakh rupees. Why should I pay or why should I incur this extra cost? Could be the questions which a lot of NPOs can be asking you. Why should I do it? The only reason is that you need to be there because this is futuristic. You need to be telling the NPOs that this is a very important platform. This can become the premier platform where the entire country's development can be positioned by leveraging excellent certified NPOs going forward. This is a very, very important aspect which you need to be talking about. The zero coupon has been taken care. The need for capacity building has been explained quite a lot. The eligibility criteria have been talked about. When you talk about listing, I would, we were extremely lucky. When we started this journey, we had people like Unitas and we had Trilegal coming and doing it for pro bono. And it's so important that you have the right people. A lot of NPOs will be able to say what they do, why they do. There's a great possibility. They could be telling you how they measure it. But to put it in a beautiful phrase and to satisfy everybody, whether it is the legal, the exchanges, SEBI, the donor, you definitely require an expert in the legal and the advisory area. So this is something which initially the first few couple of times maybe you will require, subsequently you will probably become expert. But this is important, and especially if you ask an NPO, what are the risk factors? They would not be able to tell much because they would not have thought of risk factors. If we start thinking of a risk factor, we may not get into it, right? It is passion which is driving them. So a lot of things may not come out unless asked by a legal luminary or a, advisory as to what can go wrong, what will you do at this point of time, how will you measure at this point of time. These are some of the aspects which are very, very important. Some of the NPOs I would like to highlight, and because it's a very important forum, some of the NPOs have not been able to get through even the registration because of some kind of litigation which might be there. We have taken up this, and the answer we have got is if you have a litigation at the stage 1, stage 2, they would not mind it. They will continue with the registration. But if you, as an NPO, have got a show cause notice or default kind of thing across the board, it's not just the NPO, but even their directors involved, everybody, it could become a non-mover, and registration also could be stopped. So there are some very strict governance rules covering these aspects of registration and listing. So this is my opening kind of a talk, which I would like to see that motivate the NPOs to get into it, talk to all the chartered accountants, all of you who are advising a lot of NPOs to push them to take this route of transparency, governance, and social impact. They may not be ready as on date, but if they start doing it, because a lot of changes is going to happen. You have seen how CSR from 2013 to 2023 has moved. How a simple donation which used to happen long back, probably in a golf club or some club, when I know you and I write a check of donation to you, has moved into a lot of structured way. Plus today, that structure is moving towards social impact, social measurement. The SSC in the coming years will happen, and we need to make a few things which I will probably, if I get the time, talk about it, or I'll just highlight that SSC has to become a very strong platform where you can say that this is a national body. You can say that it is SEBI regulated. You can say that SSC and NSC are all there regulating every aspect of it. You can talk about social impact audit. But I am asking, your 135, where you say 1 crore and above, the company has to do a compulsory audit. The company spends money on that. But for an NPO, if he has got 10 companies giving 1 crore each, 10 crores, there are 10 audits he has to answer. And something like probably 150 to 1,500 hours, man hours of so many people totally would go, right? So there's a huge amount of time which goes wasted because to satisfy each of them. Is SSC, is the forum, is the Corporate Affairs Ministry looking at it and saying, if you are in SSC, you are already being audited by so many bodies, including the social impact. None of these companies need to do it. The report of the SSC will be accepted. This could be music to the ears of a lot of CSR companies. Do we do that? Number 2, for a donor, India is very famous. Sometime back, this ad used to come. He's standing in front of a beautiful yacht, ship kind of yacht, and he says, "Mileage kitna deta hai?" And there, you go to an insurance guy, and he will say that insurance is being bought because of as an investment, and what is the return? So they don't care about life. Similarly, a donor today is looking for tax benefits, etc. Why will he come onto this platform and give you money? It's a very difficult question to answer. Can we look at something like the PM Care advantage to a donor in NPO? Is it possible? Why not? You are telling that this is one of the premier most chains which is going to bring in money into the system and ensure that impact happens. Should we not be considering these aspects in a very big way? The NPO does not require money to be because of that. NPO should be there because we talk about transparency and social impact. But for all others, there should be something available to them to make it good. So I think for the opening few remarks, I will stop here. I will hand over the whole thing. Our journey has been extremely good. What benefit we didn't get in 20 years of our working. Probably in the last 4 months as an organization, we have got so much publicity because we created history being the first in the country. And that's a memory which will remain and we will cherish.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Ramesh. In fact, this webinar can be extended, so it really doesn't matter. I think we've got about 400 participants. So that's about it. And I think, yeah, it's a very nice space. In fact, we've gotten into this recently, and I'm personally very excited about it. And it could kind of be this final comprehensive solution to, to have just one unified framework for everybody to raise money. But I did notice that for impact assessment under CSR, the thresholds are much higher, which is 10 crore and 1 crore, 10 crore of spend and 1 crore per project. The thing is, the one thing that struck me is, are we making it very rigorous for the NGOs here? Is something that we will also have to look at, because somebody might just say, okay, I'll go the CSR route. So I think a lot would need to be done to ensure that, players come more here, because I think it would, yeah, please go ahead.
No, very soon we are hoping that unmute. Very soon we are hoping that the CSR funding will be allowed into SSC.
Yeah. So I think it's logical also. So because I find that all that we are trying to do finally is to ensure bang for buck spent. And if you have an extremely transparent portal-driven mechanism to do it, why would two agencies want to do it? Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you. So over to Shweta.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Now we would like to request CA Abhay Kansal ji, Ghaziabad branch CIRC, to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Shweta ji. Chairman SRSB CA Shri Priya ji, Vice Chairman SRSB CA Anuj Goyal ji, all the eminent speakers in today's webinar, and other members. I am CA Abhay Kansal, Secretary ICI Ghaziabad branch. And I have been given this opportunity to introduce Ms. Reema Agarwala ji today. Reema ji has more than 13 years of experience with Bank of Baroda in corporate credit, transaction banking, resource mobilization in India and the Middle East. She specializes in real estate, manufacturing entities, and structuring deals. She also carries deep sectoral knowledge on various banking operations and potent network across geographies and functions. With these words, I welcome Reema ji for her deliberation.
Thank you, Abhay ji. Thank you, Abhay ji, for the introduction, and thank you so much, Priya ji, and the entire team for having me here. Of course, I've made a move from Bank of Baroda and currently part of Unitas Capital. Just a brief about Unitas. We are a social impact focused investment bank, and we work for for-profit impact companies, help them raise debt and equity. 15 years in operation, and work with companies in the space of financial inclusion, climate, healthcare, and agri. So definitely, we never had an experience of working with not-for-profit organization. So we are so glad that probably Ramesh ji approached us at the right time, and we felt that this could be a remarkable, probably a footprint to be able to associate with the first listing at the Social Stock Exchange. So thank you, Ramesh ji, for giving us the opportunity, and we wholeheartedly congratulate you for being the first to make the history. And this is indeed had been a remarkable journey for us to be able to do this along with Trilegal. Though unfortunately Trilegal team is not here, but it would not have been possible without their support. While my previous speakers have spoken about the regulatory aspects, I'll probably like to take a few minutes to touch upon the practical challenges and difficulties that we faced, and that probably can help many of our audience to understand what are the aspects that we need to take care of, and what was the reason that Unnati was successful in being the first one. So, I mean, that, my previous speakers have already spoken about that, how good housekeeping is very, very necessary for the listing process. I'm not talking about the registration process. So it is immensely important that you get your accounts, all your papers, documents, impact assessment report, everything in order to be able to do this. Uh, when we were given the assignment, it was a blank slate for us. We had very limited understanding of the system, the regulation. So understanding the system, regulation, deciphering meaning of lot of regulation was a bit of a challenge for us. Further, the whole process was regulated by SEBI's ICDR and LODR regulation, which actually eventually had put us in spot on multiple occasions. A couple of points we actually had to go back to both the exchanges to seek waiver, such as waiving index, and that was a big challenge. Took quite a lot of time for us to get that waiver, because as per SEBI regulation, if you're going for listing, your financials has to be under index, which was not the case, and we really did not have the time to convert the entire financials from GAAP to index, and it was indeed a costly affair. There was another roadblock that we faced, is that the audited accounts should not have been more than 180 days old, and we were almost at the brim of September, and we realized that 180 days is something that we will not be able to abide by. The exchanges have been very, very helpful in giving us the waiver. There was another challenge that we faced in case of a peer review, right, Rameshji, which was again took us considerable amount of time to get the waiver. Not only that, in fact, there was no DRHP draft that was available. So it was, Unnati, us and Trilegal team created the entire document from scratch, and it had, trust us, it has gone through several iteration with both NSE and BSE with their separate observation and separate queries. I believe the successors had a much cleaner slate and platform available for them to be able to do so. What we take a lot of pride on is that the subsequent DRHPs that has been filed had used the same layout format, and which was well accepted by the exchanges. We also did cross a lot of hurdles, for many of the successors, right? Getting those waivers in places, coordinating with exchanges on a regular basis. So wholeheartedly, we thank the exchange, Hemantji, to be able to guide us in those times. Maybe a quick suggestion, other than housekeeping, I would say that while you need the right partner, I really personally do not feel that you might need a banker for that. The regulation doesn't state though. So having a strong finance and operation team is very, very helpful. Having your documents in order, documents in place is very, very helpful. And this is an ideal time that most of the NGOs should actually get themselves registered and use the platform of SSC for raising donation, because I have a strong feeling, and I believe Hemantji and Ramesh would agree, that going forward, this probably could be the only, I'm being a little optimistic here, but probably this could be the only way for any NPO to raise money, because the government and the regulator need a lot of transparency. And unless an organization is in public eye and public forum, you really cannot ensure that transparency. Happy to answer any question that you may have. We are running out of time, so I'll take a pause and let people share the question in case they have any. I don't see any question. Can we can probably proceed, Shweta ji?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, thank you for your enlightening, enriching session. And we would now request Siripriya ma'am to give the vote of thanks.
Oh, I'm not going to disappoint you, Rima and Ramesh sir. So I'm going to anyway ask a lot of questions. But yeah, before that, Mr. Ramesh.
I had a question to ask you all. There are two aspects of mine. One is about the social audit there is an issue in that who is eligible. This assessor and the assessing firm issue has come up, and assessor NISM has approved, but they cannot certify the audit. So it means that even if you have an assessor doing it, you still have to go back to the firm. There's a gray areas even now. The December notification has tried to clarify. It's still not clarified. Even yesterday, SEBI is not. They're looking into it. That's the message we got. So this is one definite question which is pending. The second aspect of it is how does the company which is donating treat it? So there is some information that it can be as a donation, which will not get ATG, but they can treat it as a donation and write it off. Two is if they are treating it as an investment, again, when the value of the zero coupon, zero principal becomes zero at the end of the whole thing, the value of that. Today, when I issue it, instrument is 1 rupee or 2 lakh rupees, suppose 2 lakhs. But tomorrow, when it is over, it becomes zero value. At that time, how does he remove that from the demat account? There is no answer to that. So these 2-3 questions are still pending. We are not very clear of it, and things have to happen very soon. Especially the social audit part of it has to happen extremely soon.
Yes, sir. So I'll answer all your questions, and I think this whole thing has been very fluid in the last 1 month. So I'll tell you, just for the benefit of everybody, what happened when this whole thing evolved. It was supposed to be social audit. Then SEBI came back, and I think there has been a modification. It got changed to social impact assessment. Now we have received, and you're part of the Social Stock Exchange Advisory Committee as well. So we are in receipt of a few documents, which is the framework for social audit standards and everything that flows from it. And now we are trying to call this as the social impact assessment standard. So, so finally, what it would be is a social impact assessment report. So I want to just set this context, sir. What is primarily expected is a social impact report from the NGO. This is what I'm envisaging, and I will be brainstorming with my team as well as with the SSAE once it gets done, the advisory committee. So there are very clear blocks to it. The SEBI circular is very clear on what organizations have to report. They've spoken about governance, financials, operations, a whole lot of things. So what I would think will work will be, and of course, these are my personal views subject to, an agreement, a 3-part report. The first is always what we do, which is the financial statements and the assurance on the financial statements to be done by a chartered accountant. We have the ICI, which is given a reporting format for NPOs. We can work around it. Finished. The second would ideally be the annual return, which is furnished by the NGO. All that you want to say, which is not a document subject to an assessment or an assurance by whatever way you call it. Now, the third document should be your actual social impact assessment. I won't use the term assessment here because I would assume that the NGO will give us, should ideally give a report called the social impact report. The second is an annual return. The third should ideally be a social impact report. Now, the key question that emerges is, before you decide who will do it, on whether this will be an assurance or an assessment. Now, this again acquires significant context because we are talking about SEBI and a listing process and, a listed company's equivalent. So in the framework documents that we've received right now, there is a statement on an opinion. And an opinion automatically takes it to an assurance. Of course, we are entitled to provide assurance on your social impact report. So my first request would be to only call it a social impact report. And then we can give you an assessment or an assurance on it to state that it has been done. Now, this is the first baseline that we'll have to clear, and then the conceptual framework, everything flows. And then we've developed 16 social audit standards. These will either then have to be called as social impact assessment standards or whatever, once we agree on it. And if it is assurance, then there are other benchmarks that come in. There are global standards on this, there is one particular standard which is in vogue today, which is called the ISSA 3000. They are basically for sustainability engagements, but we will have to see whether, it will also cover this, but I will have to go back on this. But the long and short of it is, we'll have to cross whether it is an assurance gate, because if you're reporting to a stock exchange and you've got a bunch of social auditors, what will they do? They have to give an opinion. So in that context, what might be simple is for an organization to present its social impact report, those which contain both quantitative and qualitative parameters. Then we perform a set of procedures in accordance with the standards, and finally come back to you with an assurance. Now, on this assurance again, there are two types of assurance. One is called as a limited assurance and one is called as a reasonable assurance. A limited assurance is some kind of a negative assurance where we say, based on whatever has been provided, there is nothing that comes to our attention that the report is materially misstated. The second is a reasonable assurance where we say we've gone through the contents of the report and we find that it is, in a statutory or audit parlance, we provide reasonable assurance that it is true and fair and free from material misstatement. So I think this is slightly larger, but I've at least in my limited time attempted to conceptualize the problem. And as we speak, I'm actually reading up your theory of change logic model. So we'll definitely get back to you at the earliest, sir. But I'm sure, there are existing building blocks are well defined. We just need to take it, plug and convert it. Now, the second issue is coming to this social auditors. Presently, I think, yes, we'll have to, again, conclude this. But at the moment, it appears that if you're having a part 2, which is the social part, then it has to be certified by a social auditor. Now, whether it is an auditor or his firm, we'll come back to it again shortly, because there are other benchmarks. For example, India, suddenly we've created a lot of SROs. We have created SROs in the valuation space. We've created SROs in the insolvency space. We've also created SROs now in the social audit space. Now, in the other cases, entities have been allowed to practice as insolvency professionals. Entities have been allowed to practice as registered valuers. So we'll have to see how this will pan out here. And coming to your last question, I have already written to my accounting standards board. I mean, I do have an idea, but I'd like it to come formally, because this is still now what we spoke was, nothing was conceptualized. So we're still talking. Whereas on an accounting standard, if I have to give a guidance, I'll have to come back authoritatively. Now, there is a third element to what you spoke. The first element you said was, I will treat it as an expenditure and write it off fully. The second is, I treat it as, a bond or an investment or whatever. The third will be where I have a multi-year project. Then I would have to take a proportionate write down every year to the extent that the project has been implemented. I have placed all these before the accounting standards board. It might just be simpler to there is also a process by which you can treat it as a donation, but have a disclosure saying that, and in some sense, it is not a continuing economic benefit to the enterprise. I've already donated and be done with it because it's a ZP. So the only thing is, if there is a continuing social benefit that accrues to an enterprise who's contributing to this bond, that can come in by way of a note or a disclosure. Again, given that entity or a person who's donating could be a corporate, it has to come through an amendment in that framework. But notes are only, specified as the minimum standard. Nothing stops an enterprise, like let's say Tata's have contributed to your bond. Nothing stops them from saying, this is my disclosure, and close it there. So we'll certainly come back to you on all of the above, sir. So.
One last, okay,
yes, sure.
my understanding is that when you talk of assessment and assessment report, and it is not related to the SSC project, but for the entire organization. Am I right? There's some confusion in that.
Yes, sir. It
The
is
NPOs
not-
are having some confusion in that. My understanding was the whole organization as such. Yeah.
Yes. So see, the financials will cover the entire organization. Whether your assets are properly recorded, accounted, handled, revenues, whatever, incomes, expenditures, surplus, loss, everything. Now, if you look at the SEBI framework, in fact, I'm trying to simplify it to present it in a manner which is logical. I'll be finishing it by tomorrow, hopefully, so I can circulate something. So the second part is it really wants people to assess. So if a donor has given 1 crore, SSC believes that there is a listing obligation to go back to your donor and to the stakeholders to say, look, this is what I did with your money. And I have achieved or not achieved this desired change. So that is where whether you will do it for all your projects, top 5 projects. But in the current context, I don't see much of a challenge because the fundraise is low.
Yeah, but fundraising for the project is low, but there could be multiple projects run by the organization. So this is a very important question for many NPOs because they are running 7 projects. They have applied money for 1 project, right? So is the assessor going to be doing for all the 7 projects or just that 1 project? Is a very important question which many NPOs are asking.
Yes, sir. So I will have to come back to you on that. I will have to read the SEBI guidelines once again thoroughly. But preliminarily, I think that is why when I said when you present a 3-part report, in the second part, you're going to tell them your controls over management funds, etc. are fine. And the third should be specifically focused on this. Unless SEBI has an omnibus provision that says anybody who's coming for a fundraise must get all his projects impact assessed.
Because impact assessor says, I will not do only that project. I will do it for the whole organization. Even the impact assessor is talking with that.
Sure, sir. Sir, I can have a separate call with you because this would also be based on the principle of fungibility. See, today, my SEBI disclosure also clearly tells me what you got for this, you have to track separately. So in that context, we'll have to examine your question, but happy to do it, sir. It was very, very nice. I'll get in touch with you very shortly.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Here's a very, very hearty, record of our appreciation to all of you to having come here. In fact, we'd like to do more of this. We'd like to do more physical programs. If you think there are NGO dense areas in the country where you think you'd particularly like to take this forward, please do let us know. As a committee, we have a grant structure and we have premises in almost 100 places across the country. So very happy to have you travel to as our guest to do this. Yes.
I just wanted to share that what we have done is we have put every record of ours, every document of ours for registration and listing on the website under a tab SSC. The idea was somebody could look at it and replicate it, remove SDBS Unnati Foundation, put their company name, their resolutions, everything what will be required so that it becomes that much easier, but they still require a lawyer to present them. I'm not saying that they can do away with that. Don't try that. I know how difficult it is, So, but that we have done. Second thing for, information of many people, Sattva, and we have written a book on the entire process of SSC alone, how to register, how to list and all that. So these are all, readily available. And if any of your program, we could launch it and share it with everyone. It is possible.
Sure. We'd certainly look at this. We can actually put this out. I'll certainly look at it. And it's very nice of you to have done this because it's a lot easier to just take on if you have a format. We just like to fill up stuff. So thanks. Thank you so much. Thanks, Hemant. Thanks, Manjari. And thanks, Reema. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank
Yeah,
you
and
so
just for the record, I think we had about 400 plus participants. So thanks.
Thank you.
much. Great. Thank you.